Welcome to the Growth Whisperers podcast, where everything that we talk about is building enduring great companies. I'm Brad Giles, and as always, I'm joined today by Kevin Lawrence, my co-host. G'day, Kevin. How are you doing today?
Doing awesome, Brad. Excited to be here. A bit of a long day today, but I'm actually really looking forward to our show. I think it's going to be awesome.
Yes. It's been 12 hours, I believe, so far that you've been in the seat. So thank you for joining us. I and our audience appreciate your long day and your continued efforts to help everyone to build enduring great companies. So as always, we like to start with a word or phrase of the day. And that's really because we're encouraging that as a best practice at meetings for listeners. It's just a nice, simple way to begin. So Kevin, what might be your beginning phrase or word of the day?
Mine is engaged family. Yeah. Would you like to hear a little more?
I would be interested to hear a bit more about engaged family. Yeah.
Well, I just had some awesome experiences with family and friends, and just a reminder of what makes life awesome. We had Mother's Day here last night, and so had dinner with my mom and family, and that was great. And just some good stories and connection. It was nice to hug my parents again without wearing a mask because they've got their vaccination. I just got mine yesterday and have the sore arm to prove it. So that was good. And my son and I went for a spectacular drive, and I had some really great quality time with some good friends who were there with their sons. There was no daughters at this one, but their sons doing some kart racing and car racing. So it was all like kind of family. It was awesome experiences and friends and family, but real close, tight-knit family, and just how powerful that is. And in these kind of crazy times we've gone through, how powerful our families are. And unfortunately, some people haven't been able to have the time with their families, so that I have been able to. So I feel very grateful and appreciative of that, and just how families can drive us crazy sometimes, but how amazing it can be. So whether it's your an adopted family, a family that you kind of pull yourself to, or the family that you grew up with, it's the greatness of being connected with the family.
That's so lovely. That's so lovely. Mine's nothing at all like that.
So
whatsoever.
lovely. So lovely. Yes,
mine is a load of rubbish compared to that. No, mine is inflation. To go to the absolute opposite end of the spectrum. Look, I guess what's on my mind, I saw this Berkshire Hathaway had their meeting, obviously, one of the more famous.
This time of year, that's right.
Yeah, so that just came out, and there was a bit of an analysis about, what are they reading in terms of inflation? And, I saw, for example, I can quote so many stats on it right now, but one of them still is 1.5 times higher than the long-term average, in terms of inflation.
That's what they expect?
No, that's what it's selling at right now. So, you can go through. I saw that in baby diapers, they are going up in price because there was a problem with one of the products, the absorbent products. So there's a lot of supply chain issues throughout the world that are through different natural disasters, and obviously COVID and people shutting down plants and computer chips. So it's just on my mind. How's all of that translating? Record low, if not no, interest rates on money. So it's super cheap to borrow money. Things are going up really, really fast. It's a really dynamic economy at the moment. And that's kind of what's on my mind. What's playing on my mind? How do all of these really rapidly changing things? I mean, I could go on about that, but I won't, in the interests of our listeners' sanity.
But it is interesting because the amount of inflation that we're experiencing in some cases here, like in Canada, it's crazy. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's the real estate inflation, which is happening, but there's just the actual, some goods are going up dramatically because of the supply chain and the resource costs.
Yeah.
And basic things. But it's, and what I know and I love about when we're going through crazy times like this, both good and bad, is we just remember it's like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
It goes up, it goes through periods of up and then down. Generally, like with, prices generally always trend up over time, but there is these rolls that you're going to go through. And another quote, speaking of Berkshire Hathaway, and by the way, I went to the annual general meeting of Berkshire probably about a decade ago.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if I shared that with you. Yeah,
No,
it was
that would have been
wild
awesome.
experience.
Yeah.
It was awesome. Two of the smartest men in the world in business who don't really care about pleasing anyone.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, the truth that they dished out. Oh. And Warren is the charming one. Charlie Munger. Oh my gosh, I fell in love with that man. He's amazing.
Yeah.
A bright mind. Holy point of it. There's a quote from Buffett. I think it's appropriately attributed to Buffett, is that when people are greedy, be fearful.
Yes.
When people are fearful, be greedy. And just remind it, sometimes looking the opposite way and knowing that things go through cycles. It's part of it. So all right. So we're talking about connected families thinking about inflation. Boy, that's a weird concoction.
Yeah, I was fascinated how you're going to join these two.
I'm just going to throw the words together, Brad, because I don't see, so it's connected family inflation. Now that could be like families growing, as families grow, it's almost like inflating the family. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Let's move on. So what are we talking about today, Brad? Let's quickly skip past it. What are we talking about today?
Yeah, let's quickly move on. Today, look, this is such a great one. Collective intelligence, the key to the weekly meeting. So there's a prescriptive agenda for the weekly meeting that most of us have read, and it contains this item called collective intelligence. And many of us have asked, what is collective intelligence and why is it important? And so if you've got a 1 hour, for example, hypothetically, a 1 hour weekly meeting, and you're dedicating about 30 minutes to this thing called collective intelligence, what is it? Why is it? How does it work? So yeah, today we're talking about collective intelligence, and this is the key to the weekly meeting. We've spoken before about the weekly meeting, and there are many important bits to it. Looking at the numbers, looking at the employee and the customer data, a lot of those kind of things. But then there's this bit called collective intelligence. So we're going to dig into what is it? Why does it matter? A really interesting chat about this time when you've got all of the brains in the room. And that's really to begin what we've got to start with. What is the definition of the word?
Yeah, and let's just start with, most people never get to collective intelligence. They get to collective boredom.
Yeah.
i.e., weekly meetings are having this, imagine this brilliant strategy. Let's get the smartest people in the company. We'll put them together in a room for 90 minutes a week, and we'll bore the hell out of them. We'll make them sit and listen to each other ramble on with updates and give 10-minute explanations for something that could be covered in 30 seconds. So that's what we're going to do. Kind of sounds like listening to a professor, sometimes do lectures, but worse. So but in most meetings don't ever get here. And this is the magic opportunity. We don't need your endless PowerPoints. We don't need the endless, graphs and charts. We do need some of that stuff. Yeah. But way too much time is gone to collective updates, which is a much nicer way than saying boredom, than collective intelligence. So the key thing is, it's a massive missed opportunity that gets better ideas, faster decisions, aligns people's thinking, aligns teams, and it sounds like I'm building up to be a lot. It's because it is.
Because it is. Weekly meeting is kind of when you pulse the business. You get all of the decision makers, all of the bright people in the business, in the leadership team. Nominally, this is best practice, applying best practice best into your situation as you see fit. That's the disclaimer. But get all the bright people in the leadership team together. We go through the important key things in 5-minute punches. Like, okay, let's give us the update. Is that red or green? What's happening here? What's happening there? So we've got that over about 20 or 25 minutes. And then we move into this 30-minute collective intelligence where we've got through all of that stuff. We're avoiding rambling. I love that word rambling because I feel it so often in leadership team meetings. And it's just like, time out. That 10-minute summary, can you do it in 30 seconds? Because that's what matters. So,
but they have 10 minutes, so they want to use their time. Like they want their time, and it's like they don't know that time is low value compared to a higher value thing later, because they don't have the discipline to carve out the time for this.
Yes. Carve out. So we're allocating 30 minutes, and it's the most
or more.
Okay, that's a fair point. Nominally 30 or more. So if this means that we are assembling the leadership team, the collective intelligence of the business all together, then the question is, well, how do we get the best return on investment for that time? Well, we've got to pose the most important challenges or problems or questions to those people in a highly structured manner so that we can resolve, rectify, solve, answer those questions or problems.
Yes. And I want to give an example. I got to give a shout out to my team, because they are really good at making this happen. And every week we do this. As I mentioned, we do our meeting in the evenings because we're, usually working during the day and we can always be available. And even got some people on the East Coast and it's really late for them. But we have actually another type I just realized there, Brad, is that sometimes it's problem solving or working through something. Sometimes it's actually sharing our most intelligent ideas. i.e. as coaches and consultants, the team will present some awesome work they've done or a brilliant model. But no matter, so sometimes it's about a decision, and sometimes it's about actually just getting smarter as a group.
Yeah.
And so that's another angle. And again, every culture and every team is different, but it's enhancing the cognitive or the abilities and understanding of the team, decisions or otherwise. So that's just sort of a side thought that just came to me. So let's jump in. We got some points. So this part of the meeting is insanely valuable and engaging, and really smart, successful people want to be a part of meetings where they get to use their brain. So, but the first thing is to be aware of the value of this time. Again, if it's your senior team, it's it's the most senior people within your team, because it's you and your team. Or your company, if it's the executive team. It applies to all teams though. It's an hour to an hour and a half every single week. And you got all the decision makers there. Like this is like prime time. And if you put a number on it over the course of the year, the number adds up to be pretty substantial as well. So it's critical, and generally it's hard to get everyone in a room at other times. And if you don't have these debates, you kind of miss out on the opportunity for alignment and progress.
Yeah. Understanding that I've seen many people say, so what do we do for half an hour? Like, well, what you do is so many people have said that. What do we do for half an hour with the leadership team? Like, we're just going to pull up old problems that we've got or whatever. Well, understanding that this is a gift. This 30 minutes, and we need to make the most of it. But it's a very, very expensive gift that can make the business pulse so much faster. So don't fall into the old rhythms of rambling and talking about stuff just as they pop into your head. And so I guess when you understand the value of the time or the cost of the time, you can also understand the potential of the time. So what if every single week you solved a big problem or resolved a big issue or addressed a big challenge that you're facing, or broke down a big opportunity. Something like, if there was one big thing and you had a really intense structured debate every single week, that may seem a bit strange for the first few weeks, but when you get into that rhythm, you pulse so much faster.
Yeah, and together, because you're debating and agreeing around these. So it's insanely valuable, and it's insanely impactful, 30 or 60 minutes a week. So number two is you got to agree on the questions that you're going to debate. Like, what is the real question? And that's the key. We watch teams try to do this, and they'll just start talking about something, and we're like, whoa, time out. What's the and favorite question? What's the question we're trying to answer here?
Yeah.
Right. What is the question? And it's not what the idea is. And often, as coaches and facilitators, we're trying to boil things down. What's the question? What are we trying to answer? And if you start with that, it locks everyone's brain onto, okay, we're trying to figure out, for example, I might share with you earlier, with our team meeting we had earlier today, how do we measure the impact our firm is having on our clients? Mm-hmm. Right. And that is the question. And so as we dug into it, we further refined the question. And then we had a debate, and we went all over the road. We went over here and over there. What about this? And it was going nowhere. And all of a sudden, one guy goes, Brett on my team goes, I think it's a direct impact and indirect. That's what we're looking for. Direct is what we can directly see by the people that we directly engage with. Indirect is the ripple effect that we're having by working through those leaders on the whole organization. And we don't know which one's right, but we know we're going to pay attention to both, because there is a direct and there is an indirect. And the indirect, it might be a feel better number because it's bigger. The direct is more tangible, but we might miss some of the. So point of it is debate. We landed it, we built a model, and then we actioned it. So is this one thing going to change the world? No, but it's another thing our team is aligned around. It's another thing that helps us to track the progress of our team and our firm. And we agreed on it. And now we can move on to whatever the next thing is. Mm-hmm. And the item is closed. But we needed all the brains in the room to get there and to align around it. Go ahead, Brad.
And so what are the big issues that you need to resolve? So it might be worth keeping a running list of potential issues that you've got to resolve, that you need to actually thrash out as a team. I love this quote by Albert Einstein. He says, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solutions. Now that's Einstein, not you and I. Okay.
Yes.
But what it really says,
even flip it around. I'd spend 5 minutes figuring out the question.
Yeah.
Do you know how much of an improvement it would be if people spent 5 minutes trying to figure out the damn question?
Yeah.
It's interesting because
huge improvement.
Huge. When we do a lot our quarterly strat plannings, there's a lot of debates we have around key issues like that, a lot of collective intelligence. And it seems to be easier to have us run those parts of meetings than the team. But we spend time up front scoping out what are the discussions we want to have, what is the question, and actually spending time up front to get to the root of it. And it's work to figure it out. And when we do the work, it's easier, but it's work to figure out.
You've got to have the right question. If you're going to spend 30 minutes, which is very expensive and potentially could create a great result, spending time as a team, understanding, right, this is the real question. What's the real issue? Right. And this is the real question that we need to resolve as a team.
Right.
But that makes
it so much easier.
But that doesn't happen on the day most of the time. I want to be really clear about that. Most of the time, we want we want to think about it beforehand. We want to come with an opinion. And also, this really leads into number 3. We want to...
But before,
yes.
Okay, sorry. I would say before you do, I want to allow for the people that like to run a little loose and a little freestyle, right? And I'm a little more freestyle than you. You're a little more organized and regimented. Both are good. But for those freestylers out there, it's okay to lay down the question live in the meeting, I think. There's a lot of times when we can, especially on a weekly. And if you can be prepared, it's better. Sometimes it's better to run with it right there in the moment. And it's okay to do both.
So the freaky weird part of me, which is quite a large part, responds to that by saying, I don't want people to get 25 minutes into a meeting and then say, okay, now we've got 30 minutes for collective intelligence. What should we talk about? And it just falls down to an unorganized rabble. So there's somewhere in the middle.
Right. And the freaky weird part of me would say is the way if you run your meeting right, you should be asking about, in our agendas, what are the challenges or opportunities, and flushing some of that stuff out earlier in the meeting. So for example, in our agenda, by the time we get there, we had, 7 things that we needed to talk about. Most of which related to our quarterly rocks, our quarterly goals. Yeah. But we've already pre-flushed them out, or as the great Jim Collins would say, in the first part of that meeting, you're mining for brutal facts. Mining. It's like a mining expedition. And then in the collective intelligence, then you're processing or dealing with some of those brutal facts that you need to debate. So, but yeah, you don't want to sit there with it being crickets. But I think if you have the right agenda, you've flushed them out, or alternatively, as Brad would prefer, and I think it's also a good discipline, you pre-decide these things so you've got a week or 2 to get ready for it. And I agree. Like even on ours, we today on a meeting, we were putting a couple weeks out some topics that we wanted to dig into a little bit further, and then we'll have time to be prepared. Okay, so back to number 3, Brad. Over to you.
Be prepared. Sometimes things will pop up, and you need, like you've said, that you need to do it. But like in terms of a structure, being prepared. So if we know the question, number 2, we know what the question is, then we move to, well, we've got to agree on a desired outcome. What is the outcome that we're looking for from this meeting? We want to resolve this. We want to make a decision on that. We want to, whatever it is, what is the outcome that we need to get? And then allocate a presenter to the topic. So someone who's going to, let's say, run or chair the presentation. Now that might mean that they'll come prepared with 2 or 3 PowerPoint slides, for example. It doesn't need to be 100 slides, but there is a succinct clarity of the question. There may be supporting data to that so that everybody in the meeting understands all of the facts and the situation and where we're at. So someone to come prepared and present and to kind of own that and facilitate that discussion.
Yeah, and on that, they kind of lay down everything that we know, which is great. And what I have learned is when you ask the head of R&D to come make a presentation on this important decision you want to make, this is like their life's work or a reflection. They want to give you a 60-minute presentation. And so here's the pro tip. You tell whatever the time is on the agenda, 1/3 of it goes to presenting, 2/3 is debate.
Yes.
And you could even take it down to a quarter present. So for example, we got a 30-minute slot for that critical topic.
Yep.
We use timers. Like I set my phone as loud as it'll go. We set a timer. You have 10 minutes to present, and then there's 20 minutes to debate. And even with the 20 minutes to debate, I'll set the timer 15. So we've got a 15-minute buffer because it always spills over a little bit, and to wrap up to a solid close.
So let's go to a hypothetical. Sales manager is going to present on the underperformance of a geography.
Yep.
the leadership team is going to talk about it, or we're going to allocate 30 minutes in our weekly meeting to it. We want you to present all of the facts, all of the data for 10 minutes, for the first 10 minutes, and then we'll discuss and debate it for the following 20 minutes. And then this is the outcome that we want to either decide to a turnaround plan for that geography, or we want to shut it down. That's the decision that we've got to make. So that's a hypothetical. But then what does the sales manager think? Like, how do I present all of the information? Like, that's what we want.
That's his job. That's his job.
I agree, but that's what we want him to do. We don't want him
we want him to think for 3 hours.
Yes.
And organize for 6 hours if needed. I'm exaggerating. So that in 8 to 10 minutes, he can make a beautiful presentation of only what matters.
If he doesn't, going back. Okay. If he doesn't come prepared, he'll just sprout off opinions as they pop into his head, and it won't be a meaningful discussion. If instead he comes in with that preparation that you've discussed, this is the trade data for the geography. Right. This is what our competitors are doing. This is the conversion rate of salespeople.
Clearly and succinctly with or he shows us that he's not as good as we thought he is. That's a whole,
So we're setting.
But the point of it's our job to set them up to win.
Yes.
And otherwise, he's going to make a 30-minute presentation. We're going to run out of time. We're not going to get a decision. It's going to be frustrated. So, and in that case, if it was something that important, I would say, 8 to 10 minutes to present. I would set a timer for 8. He'd be finished presenting by 10, and then we would just ask a lot of questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And debate and debate and debate. And no, that's a big decision, but it's just also, when you tell people in advance, they prepare differently, because sometimes they present a lot of stuff. So it's the end of the day, we over present and under discuss. That is the root of this. Over present, under discuss, and collective intelligence is about discussing and asking questions. So I think that's.
And as someone who's done that, I love it when people come into the meeting and they said, well, before I saw that presentation, this was my opinion. And now that I understand the facts, I have a new opinion. Like that is an outcome of a good presentation. So let's move on to number 4.
And I would say is, but before you do, if you really want to really wanted him to nail it, I would tell him to run it by finance before he comes in.
Beautiful.
One of my favorites and some of the best, CPMG companies, make a finance person be a part of any and every presentation.
Beautiful.
Because finance is the source of truth. The truth is numbers in business. So if they want to really double people's odds, have finance involved in the preparation, because finance is the source of numbers, or the ideal source of numbers. Anyway, just as a side note. Okay, let's move on. Number 4.
Rules of engagement. So we're coming prepared, but then how do we avoid the meeting descending into anarchy? How do we avoid the meeting descending into people are threatened, people, get into arguments? Well, we want to have a set of rules to say, when we come together, this is how we play fairly. This is how we argue and debate fairly. And so for me, I've got a set of rules that I play by every time I present to a quarterly offsite workshop with the leadership team. I go through these 3 rules of engagement. So first of all is brutal honesty. It's incumbent on you to say the things that need to be said. And no point walking away saying we didn't talk about this and we didn't talk about that. Number 2 is no shame and no blame. So we're not here to shame people and we're not here to blame people. And then number 3 is disagree and commit. And that means that there may be things that you disagree with that we as a team agree to execute, but you will commit to their successful execution. So those 3 things come from Jim Collins' Good to Great, when he analyzed 1,435 companies, distilled them down to 11. Those were the traits that all of those 11 great companies had. in their leadership teams, those behavioral traits. And so that's what I use as the rules of engagement in the meetings that I conduct. And that's kind of what we advocate for here too.
Yeah, and those are us set. You can make up your own. It doesn't matter. We've got ones even in some companies, and we work with companies to develop these when we do a lot of debating. Some people have a mechanism where you raise your hand if you're going to speak, and you let the other person finish first. Others have one like leave it all on the table, i.e., if everything, don't hold back. And if you've held something back, make sure you save it before the meeting leaves. Another one is if you disagree after you leave the room, you communicate back with the entire group.
Yeah. That
you've got a bit of an issue that needs to be discussed. You don't go and lobby one person at a time. There's everybody's got different things. Other people, another one is that that once you commit, you make sure you stay 100% supportive outside the room and don't undermine. Everyone's got their own little glitches, but it's super important we have those rules of engagement, and you can just brainstorm, what do we think we need to agree to have effective debates and be an effective team. It's a great thing. Mike Krzyzewski, who's the coach of the massively winning Duke basketball program. Mm-hmm. He coached the U.S. men's Olympic team, I think, a couple of times. One as an assistant, one as the full coach. Outstanding coach. This is what he does with all of his teams when he starts with them, especially the Olympic team, because you got the highest paid athletes in the world. You can't come in and tell them what to do. They make their own set of rules, including even how they respect the people that are cleaning the locker rooms and taking care of them. It's a wonderful team activity. So point of it is to have 2, 3, 4, 5 of these. His was actually 12 on one of his sets he shared.
Yeah.
But still, to have a handful of basic rules that we stick to, and I recommend put them at the top of the agenda for a while until they get burnt into your DNA.
Awesome.
Cool. Number 5. Helpful Cassandras. And Brad's looking at me funny because that's not what we have written down in our prep notes. So Andy Grove from Intel, in his book, High Output Management, has this thing called Helpful Cassandras. And he makes sure that there was one on every team or project he was part of. And this is the person that would tell him he had spinach in his teeth or that he just had a really bad idea. These are people that will often have contrary opinions and disagree with it and find the problems and the holes and whatever the hell it is that you have. And the point of it is it's very easy to surround yourself with people who, and it's frictionless to surround yourself with people who agree with your brilliant ideas, except for when you're not that brilliant. So you gotta ask for and have people who will bring contrary opinions and appreciate them. So he said without that, he's in deep trouble because too many people agree with him. And when he's wrong, people still agree with him. But he always made sure there was a person on those teams that would call him on stuff. I've got one person on my team who is a master of this. And not only disagreeing, but coming up with total ideas in way different directions. Like we're all running down the center of the road. He's like 500 miles off to the left in another world. And it's awesome. It's awesome because it creates better debates and it shakes things up and not just, anyway, I'm going off with this one. So you need contrary opinions and you got to appreciate them and thank them. And this guy on my team, I thank him all the time, publicly, privately, even though I disagree with him a whole bunch. It's super important to have healthy debates.
That's the value. So in the context of the weekly meeting, and specifically collective intelligence, we've had a person who's presented and they have spent a substantial amount of time, hopefully, preparing to present.
Yep.
And we've got to find a gap in the next 20 minutes where we're debating to say, okay, who has a different opinion? Who can mount a case to challenge what's been said here? It's just a simple question, But if we can plug that in there, it can make a really big difference. And you can unlock some shyness, perhaps, where people are thinking something but not saying it, which is what we want.
Or you can have people trade positions against instead of for. So that's something that you can, it's a technique that you can try in terms of just shaking it up. So whether it's an individual, reversing arguments, you just got to look at the other side sometimes. Or you could look at the option of not doing what you're talking about doing. So get contrary opinions and appreciate them, value them, and be careful that you're not just shutting them down, which is easy to do. Number 6 was kind of covered off a little bit by your rules of engagement, but it's disagree and commit, or, agree to disagree, which basically means at some point, if you have all these awesome contrary opinions, not everyone's going to agree. And if you go for consensus on every decision, you probably won't make any. Some you will. But at some point, you got to find a way to say, okay, disagree and commit, and someone's got to call it. And it'd be like, if Brad, if you and I disagree on it, be like, okay, I'd say to Brad, can you, I feel very passionate about this. Can you live with supporting the way I'm proposing it?
Yeah.
And if Brad says no, okay, well, then maybe we have to continue. But sometimes you just almost have to ask for support to push ahead. Otherwise you get stuck. It's a very important thing to do so you don't get lost in ongoing debate, especially for low value or low impact things.
There's an ocean of difference between agree to disagree and disagree and commit. So agree to disagree means that we leave this argument or this debate in an unresolved state, and you maintain your opinion and I maintain mine. The sea of difference is that when we say disagree and commit, what we're saying is, okay, I voiced that I disagree with this, but as a team, I commit to the successful execution of this project. And some people, have said to me in those types of meetings, okay, well, I'm going to agree to disagree. And I say, that's not a closure, okay, because we're walking away with different opinions.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
It's a sea of difference. Like, we can't let agree to disagree get in the way of disagree and commit, because the worst possible thing that you can do is go 6 weeks into a 13-week quarter and say, Kevin, I told you that wasn't going to work anyway.
Yeah.
Because you
and by the way, when I was saying agree to disagree, I was having the same meaning in my mind as your disagree and commit.
Yes.
Is you agree to disagree and you're like joined in harmony to push ahead. But disagree and commit is probably a better distinction because it has the commit part. Yes. It's like, okay, Brad would say, well, I disagree with what you're saying, but I'm going to commit to it and I'm going to work with you to make it happen.
Yep.
Which is agreeing to disagree. It almost could still feel like a standoff, which is not good. We do not want that. You want to have said your piece and let's move on. Yeah. And let's move on together and make it happen. Yes.
Yeah. Again,
it's also important because that way you can call the question, as I mentioned earlier, and you can move on. And sometimes in a room, someone's just got to say it. Hey, can you acknowledge that you disagree but still support it, and then let's move and commit to moving on.
Yeah. Again, to close that out, the worst thing that can happen is you're midway through a quarter and someone's actively undermining the decision. Like the damage to team harmony is just awful. Okay, so on that subject, let's move on to the final number 7. Clarity on the decision. So the objective is, with collective intelligence, is to get an outcome every week. It's a component of the weekly meeting because we want to get an outcome. We want to get a presentation. We want to get an understanding of the facts but we're going in knowing the answer that we want to get. So if we're going in knowing the answer that we want to get, we've got to get the answer. We've got to get the decision. The reason that we've got all of the collective intelligence, all of the leadership team, some of the smartest or most capable people in the business in the room is to get the answer. So don't walk away from collective intelligence without the decision or the answer. And, here's another little pet favorite of mine is, okay, so we're going to, our plan is to go and build a plan. What? Okay, so we've just come together as a group for the purpose of building a 90-day plan, and your plan is that you're going to go and build a plan. So we don't want to.
That's not good enough.
No, we don't want to end a meeting like that saying, okay, I'm going to go and build a plan, because it's about decisions.
Yes. And I think on this, and as simple as it sounds, what we find, especially in this COVID world, when we're doing virtual meetings, is that you type the decision on screen and people can see it. Okay, yes. Here's the decision, because sometimes people hear it, but they don't hear it. Okay, Fred is going to go and do X, Y, Z by doing A, B, C by a certain date, right? But it's lit, and we put it. Oh no, that's not what I meant. And how many times it's helped us because we're putting these on screen to be able to lock it down, saying here is the exact action, who, what, and when is going to happen. It's super important. So that's some 7 awesome points. So if we go back into the top, our whole thing is how do you leverage the power of the most impactful brains on your team, right? And it's this collective intelligence should be part of the weekly meeting. The same disciplines should hold true in your monthly and quarterly and annual meetings, where you have robust debates to make important decisions. And so, maybe I'll run through the first 3 here, Brad, you can do the rest. Is that, aware of the value of the time. That is rare, important time. It could be the most important time of that week for that whole team. Agree on the question up front. What is the question we are trying to answer? Then be prepared. Ideally, if you've done it in advance, if it's on the spot, do your best. If it's in advance, someone can come prepared with as much data and facts and understanding of the current situation. And then rules of engagement, so you get everybody participating. You need everyone to be contributing to the discussion.
Yes, and then we are moving to ask for contrary opinions. So we want to get we want to get different opinions. We don't want everyone to just go, well, because Joe has prepared, we need to do what Joe says. We need to get different opinions, and we need to ask for them. Who has a contrary opinion throughout the meeting? The next one, number 6 is it's okay to disagree, but eventually we need to commit. So I mentioned disagree and commit. We need to get commitment around the decision, and we don't need to have people who are agreeing to disagree. That's an awful status in a leadership team. And then finally, we've got to close the meeting by having clarity and specificity on the decision. And as Kevin so rightly said, in the Zoom world, write it on the screen, write it on the whiteboard if you're in a meeting room. Say, this is the decision that we land on. Are we all agreed? And that's how you close out that weekly collective intelligence. What a lovely chat we've had.
It is. And one more thought I had there, Brad, is that sometimes one of the decisions is what you're going to talk about next time, right? The subjects of who is going to present what for debate the following week. Yeah, great conversation. So thanks for listening. This has been the Growth Whisperers podcast with my good friend, Brad Giles, who you can reach at evolutionpartners.com.au, and myself, Kevin Lawrence, at lawrenceandco.com. We hope you have an awesome week and dial in those weekly meetings to leverage the biggest brains in your group and make some good things come out of it. All right. Have a good one. All the best.